A billionaire father thought he could buy his daughter's happiness, until a kind waitress showed him what money could never give. The billionaire father had everything most people could only dream about. He owned tall buildings with his name shining in lights, cars that sparkled like mirrors, and a house so big that people often got lost in it. But inside that house, there was something missing that money could never buy. His little daughter lived with him there, and though she had toys stacked in rooms like small mountains and clothes that came from the best shops in the world, she didn't have the one thing she wanted the most. She didn't have her mother. Her mother had passed away when she was too young to even understand what it meant. Sometimes she asked where her mother went, and the father would sit in silence, staring at her small, innocent eyes, unsure how to explain life and loss to someone who still believed in fairy tales. He loved his daughter more than anything, but his way of showing it was often through gifts and luxuries. He bought her dolls from Paris, dresses stitched with pearls, and even built a private playground just for her. Yet when she played alone. The father worked too much. He was always on phone calls, meetings, and traveling for business. When he was home, his eyes were often on his laptop or files, not on the little girl who longed for him to sit down and listen to her stories. She didn't complain. She was a sweet child, soft-spoken and polite, but deep inside she felt something missing. A hole in her heart where a mother's hug should have been. One afternoon, the father decided to do something different. Instead of taking her to another fancy restaurant where waiters wore suits and spoke in polished voices, he took her to a small diner on the edge of town. It was nothing like the places they usually went to. The lights were warm and soft. The chairs were old but comfortable, and the smell of fresh pancakes filled the air. Thought maybe this would be good for her. Something simple, something normal. The little girl looked around with wide eyes. Families were sitting at tables laughing, sharing fries, passing plates across the table. Children were running around, giggling, while their parents called after them. She watched them carefully, her small hands holding onto the edge of her seat. She saw a mother leaning down to wipe ketchup from her son's cheek, another tying her daughter's shoelaces, and one more holding her child close while they ate from the same plate. Her heart squeezed at the sight. The father noticed her staring. He didn't say anything, but inside, he felt a twist of guilt. He wondered what she was thinking, and he already knew the answer. A young waitress walked over to their table. She had tired eyes but a bright smile, the kind of smile that made people feel at ease right away. She greeted the father politely, but when she looked at the little girl, her face softened even more. She bent down to the girl's level and asked, "What would you like today, sweetheart?" The girl blinked, surprised that someone was talking to her so kindly. She smiled shyly and whispered her order, something simple like pancakes and orange juice. The waitress nodded and complimented her dress, saying she looked like a little princess. The girl's face lit up, her eyes sparkling at the kindness, as the waitress walked away. The little girl followed her with her eyes, watching her carry trays and chat warmly with other families. She saw how she laughed easily, how she leaned down to talk to children, how she always looked like she truly cared. Something inside the girl stirred. When the waitress came back with their food, she placed the plates gently in front of them. The little girl looked up at her with innocent eyes, her lips trembling as if she was holding back words. The waitress noticed and crouched down again, smiling softly.
"Hey, sweetheart,"
she asked. The girl hesitated for a moment, then quietly whispered, "Can you be my mommy?" "I don't have one." The air froze. The father's hand stopped halfway to his coffee cup. His heart skipped a beat, and his throat tightened. Around them, the chatter in the diner seemed to fade. The waitress's eyes widened. Her smile faltered for just a second, as the weight of the little girl's words sank in. The waitress looked at the father, as if asking for permission, but his face was frozen with shock. Then she turned back to the girl, her own eyes misting with emotion. She slowly reached out, wrapping her arms around the child in a warm, gentle hug. The girl melted into her embrace, clutching her tightly as though she had been waiting for that hug her whole life. The father watched silently, his chest heavy with emotions he couldn't explain. He had given his daughter everything money could, Yet in this small diner, in the arms of a stranger, she found something he couldn't provide. He felt guilt pressing on him, a painful reminder that despite his wealth and power, he had not been able to fill the emptiness his daughter carried inside her. The waitress stroked the girl's hair softly, whispering, "You're such a sweet girl. You're so loved. Don't ever forget that." The girl smiled through her tiny tears, nodding as if those words were the most precious gift she had ever received. The father couldn't look away. Something deep inside him cracked open. He thought of all the nights his daughter had gone to, sleep clutching her toys instead of a warm hug. All the time she had asked small questions about her mother that he couldn't answer. He thought of how she had smiled more in the last few minutes with this kind waitress than she had in weeks. When the hug ended, the little girl held the waitress's hand for a moment longer before letting go. The waitress smiled again, wiping the corner of her own eyes quickly so the child wouldn't see. She stood up, composed herself, and continued her work. But she kept glancing back at their table as though she had left a piece of her heart with that little girl. The father sat there in silence, barely touching his food. He was lost in thought, replaying the moment again and again. He didn't know why it had affected him so deeply, but he felt something change inside him. He wasn't just a billionaire father sitting in a diner anymore. He was a man staring at the truth. His daughter didn't need more toys, more gifts, or more luxury. She needed love, warmth, and someone who could give her what he couldn't. As they left the diner, the girl looked back one last time, waving shyly at the waitress. The waitress waved back, her smile tinged with sadness and something unspoken. The father watched this small exchange carefully, his mind heavy, his heart uneasy. He held his daughter's hand tightly as they stepped outside, but for the first time in years he wondered if he had been holding her the wrong way all along. The next day after the diner visit, the father could not shake the memory of what had happened. He kept seeing the way his little girl had looked at the waitress, and the way she had clung to the woman's arms, as if she had finally found something she had been searching for. That single moment had replayed in his mind over and over again, disturbing him more than any business problem ever could. He was a man used to fixing problems with money, but this time he felt powerless. His daughter woke up that morning with a kind of glow on her face. She ate her breakfast quietly, but she seemed distracted, as if her mind was elsewhere. She didn't ask for her toys or the cartoons she usually liked to watch. Instead, she kept holding her spoon absent-mindedly, humming a little tune and looking toward her father with an unusual softness. He noticed it. He wondered if she was thinking of the waitress too. Later that day, he decided to take her out again. He drove her through the busy streets. But instead of heading toward their mansion or the corporate buildings he owned, he turned the car back toward the same diner. His daughter's eyes lit up the moment she recognized it. She clapped her hands softly, almost as if she knew what it meant. Inside the diner, the warm smell of fresh food greeted them again. People were talking and laughing, children were eating with their parents, and the atmosphere was filled with a kind of happiness the father could never buy. They took the same booth as before, and almost immediately the little girl looked around as if searching for someone. Her eyes brightened. When she spotted the waitress noticed them too, and her face softened into a smile. She walked over, balancing her tray, and bent down beside the girl. "Well, look who's back," she said kindly. The girl giggled shyly, playing with the hem of her dress, and then looked at her father, as if asking for permission to speak. He nodded gently, giving her the comfort to open her heart. The girl whispered, "I wanted to see you again." Her words carried an honesty that struck both the waitress and her father. The waitress's smile trembled slightly, but she reached out and touched the girl's small hand with genuine warmth. "I'm glad you came back," she replied. The father sat quietly, watching the exchange. For the first time in a long while, he felt like an outsider in his own daughter's world. Usually she clung to him for everything, but here she was opening her heart to someone else. He didn't feel jealous. He felt humbled. When to take their order, the girl leaned across the table and whispered to her father, "She's really nice. Can we sit with her more?" Her innocent question pierced through him. He simply nodded, unable to find words. When the food came, the waitress stayed a little longer, talking to the girl about school, about her favorite toys, and even asking what stories she liked to hear before bed. the child answered eagerly, her face full of excitement. Like a flower that had finally found sunlight, and then it happened again. The girl paused mid-sentence, looked up at the waitress with big eyes, and said louder this time, "Can you be my mommy, please?" The whole diner seemed to freeze. A couple sitting nearby stopped eating for a second and glanced over. It's the father's. Chest tightened. He felt his throat dry, his body heavy. He had prepared himself for the possibility that his daughter might ask again. But nothing could have softened the blow of hearing it out loud, in public, where everyone could hear the truth of her longing. The waitress froze too, her face crumpling with emotion. She looked at the girl, then at the father, and then back at the girl again. Tears welled in her eyes, but she held them back with a trembling smile. She crouched down beside the booth and gently took the girl's hands in hers. "Sweetheart," she said softly, her voice filled with compassion, "I'm not your mommy, but I think you are one of the most special little girls I've ever met." The girl's lips trembled. "But I want one. I want you." Go. Her voice broke, her eyes glistening. With tears, she leaned forward suddenly and wrapped her arms tightly around the waitress's neck, holding her as if she would never let go. The waitress hugged her back instantly, tears spilling from her eyes now. She rocked the girl gently in her arms, whispering, "It's okay. You're safe. You're so loved. You're not alone." The father felt something shatter inside him. He wanted to cry, but couldn't. He had built walls around himself for so many years. Small question from his daughter, and one hug from a stranger. The people in the diner tried to look away out of respect, but some couldn't help watching with sympathy. The sight of a lonely child holding on to a kind stranger was too powerful to ignore. When the girl finally let go, her eyes were red, but her smile was pure. She nestled back into the booth, holding her father's hand now, but still looking at the waitress with a quiet hope. The waitress wiped her eyes quickly and stood up, taking a deep breath. Softly, trying to regain her composure, the father finally spoke, his voice low and heavy. "Thank you." He didn't just mean the pancakes, meant for everything. The hug, the kindness, the way she gave his daughter something he never could. The rest of the meal passed quietly. The girl kept sneaking smiles at the waitress whenever she walked by, and the waitress always returned them warmly. The father ate little, his mind tangled in thoughts. He knew something had shifted inside his daughter, but also inside himself. When it was time to leave, the girl clung to the waitress one more time, giving her a quick squeeze before letting go. "I'll come back, okay?" she promised with the innocence of a child who believed in forever. The waitress knelt down and kissed her forehead softly. "I'll be here," she said. As the father and daughter walked out of the diner, the father's chest ached. He carried his daughter in his arms, but her heart was clearly still inside with that waitress. He realized he couldn't ignore it anymore. His daughter's longing was real, and no amount of toys or money could silence it. That night, as he tucked her into bed, she asked in a sleepy voice, "Out, do you think she could really be my mommy?" The father froze. He brushed her hair back gently, his throat tight, and whispered, "Good night, my princess." But deep inside, he knew he couldn't brush away her question this time. It would follow him, echoing in his heart until he faced it. The father could not sleep that night. He lay in his large bed, staring at the ceiling, while the silence of the mansion pressed down on him. His daughter's small question, her innocent plea, echoed in his ears again and again. "Can you be my mommy?" It was such a simple sentence, spoken with such honesty, but it carried the weight of everything he had failed to give her. He had built empires, crushed competitors, and managed fortunes. But he could not give his little girl the one thing her heart truly wanted. He turned on his side, watching the door to his daughter's room down the hall. He thought about how quickly she had warmed up to the waitress, how easily she had leaned into her arms, how happy she had looked in that simple embrace. It stung him, because it showed him something he had always been afraid to admit: his daughter was lonely, and he was powerless to change that loneliness with money. The next morning, when he came down for breakfast, his daughter was already waiting at the table. She was wearing her favorite dress, the one covered in tiny flowers, and her hair was a little messy from sleep. But what struck him most was the smile on her face. She was humming to herself, swinging her legs under the chair, and she looked at him as though she had a secret to share. "Daddy," she said softly, "can we go back to the diner today?" The father paused, his coffee cup halfway to his lips. She had never been so eager to return to any place before. Usually she grew tired of things quickly, bored by toys, distracted by gadgets. But this time, there was a glow in her eyes he had not seen in years. He set down his cup slowly and nodded. "Yes, we can go." Her joy was immediate. She clapped her little hands and beamed at him, as if he had just promised her the whole world. He swallowed hard, realizing that the whole world to her was not cars or castles or jewels. It was just the warmth of a hug from a kind woman. When they arrived at the diner later that day, his daughter rushed ahead, pulling on his hand eagerly. She looked around, searching until she spotted the waitress. The waitress noticed her too, and her tired face lit up with recognition. She hurried over, crouched down, and opened her arms. The little girl ran straight into them. Hugging her tightly, the father stood a few steps away, watching with a storm of emotions inside him. He wanted to feel happy for his daughter, but he also felt guilty. This stranger had given his child something he hadn't managed in years. The girl laughed softly as the waitress teased her about being back so soon, and he realized he hadn't heard his daughter laugh like that in a very long time. They sat down at their usual booth. The waitress took their order, but she lingered again, leaning closer to the girl, asking about her day and her favorite cartoons. The little girl chattered away, her cheeks glowing with excitement. The father watched, noticing the small details. Way his daughter leaned forward eagerly, the way her eyes sparkled, the way her hands moved as she told her tiny stories. He felt like an observer in his own daughter's life. He thought back to all the times he had tried to cheer her up with gifts. The smile she gave when she unwrapped a doll or rode a pony was never this bright, never this genuine. It was different with the waitress. There was no pretense, no fancy wrapping paper, no expensive surprises, just warmth, kindness, and attention. After the waitress left to serve other tables, the father stared at his daughter. "You like her a lot, don't you?" he asked softly. The girl nodded without hesitation. "She makes me feel happy. She listens to me." Those words hit him like a knife. "She listens to me." He realized how many times his daughter had tried to tell him something while he was distracted by his phone, his meetings, his business deals. He thought he was being a good father by providing for her, but in truth, he had been absent in the simplest ways that mattered the most. The rest of the meal passed with him in silence, watching, listening, and reflecting. Every time the waitress returned, his daughter lit up, and every time she left, the glow lingered. The father found himself studying the waitress too. She moved quickly between tables, balancing trays, but she always found a moment to smile at his daughter, to ruffle her hair gently, or to ask another small question. She wasn't pretending, he could see it in her eyes. She genuinely cared. Later that evening, when they were back home, the father sat in his study with the curtains drawn. He poured himself a glass of water, though he didn't drink it. His mind was heavy. He knew he needed to understand who this woman was. She wasn't just another waitress anymore. She had become important to his daughter. And strangely, she had become important to him too. The next day, while his daughter was at her art lesson, he asked one of his assistants to discreetly find out about the waitress. It didn't take long. The report was simple, but heartbreaking. She was a hard-working woman, living in a small apartment with her aging parents. She had once been a mother herself, but tragedy had taken her child away years ago. Since then, she had thrown herself into work, hiding her grief behind her warm smile. The father sat with the report in his hands, stunned. He thought about how fate had brought her into their lives, how his daughter had chosen her out of all the people in the world, and how both of them carried wounds that the other could heal. His daughter had lost a mother. The waitress had lost a child. And somehow, in that diner, in that hug, they had found each other. That night, when he tucked his daughter into bed, she whispered again, "Daddy, I wish she could be my mommy." He brushed her hair back, his heart aching. For the first time, he didn't dismiss her words as childish wishes. For the first time, he wondered if maybe his daughter was right. He kissed her forehead and watched her drift off to sleep, clutching her stuffed bear tightly. Then he sat by her bedside for a long time, thinking, listening to the sound of her small breaths. He realized that his wealth meant nothing compared to this, compared to giving his daughter the chance to feel loved, safe, and whole again. The father closed his eyes, knowing that his life was about to change. Couldn't ignore the truth anymore. His daughter had shown him what really mattered, and now he had to decide what to do with it. The father woke up the next morning with a strange heaviness in his chest. He was not a man who usually hesitated about decisions. In his business life, he was known for being sharp, quick, and ruthless when necessary. But when it came to his daughter and the feelings she had revealed at the diner, he found himself torn in ways he had never experienced before. He couldn't stop thinking about the waitress. Her story had touched him deeply. The way she had embraced his daughter still echoed in his mind like a song he couldn't forget. At breakfast, his daughter was unusually quiet. She played with her food, stirring her spoon in circles instead of eating. Finally, she lifted her big, hopeful eyes and asked softly, "Daddy, can we see her today?" Her voice was filled with longing, and he couldn't bring himself to say no. He nodded gently, and her face lit up instantly. She hopped out of her chair, ran upstairs to get ready, and came back in one of her favorite dresses. It was clear to him that she wanted to look her best, not for him, not for anyone else, but for the waitress. When they reached the diner, the father noticed how the waitress's face brightened the moment she saw his daughter. She rushed over, bent down, and opened her arms, and the little girl ran into them without hesitation. The father stood back, feeling both humbled and grateful. He could see the joy in his daughter's eyes, the kind of joy he could never buy. With all his billions, as the days passed, these visits became more frequent. What had started as a one-time lunch had turned into a regular part of their lives. The waitress welcomed them every time, always with the same warmth and genuine care. The girl became more and more attached to her, telling her stories, sharing secrets, and even drawing little pictures to give her. The father sat quietly, watching their bond grow stronger with each passing day. But something else began to happen too. The father started noticing the waitress in ways he hadn't before. He saw how she moved gracefully between tables, always kind to everyone, even when she was clearly tired. He saw how her smile never seemed forced, how she had a way of making people feel special. And he also noticed the small moments of sadness in her eyes when she thought no one was watching. One afternoon, after a particularly busy lunch rush, the father found a chance to speak with her while his daughter was coloring. Quietly at the table, he asked her about herself, not as a customer, but as a man who genuinely wanted to know. At first she was hesitant, but then she opened up. She told him about her parents, who depended on her income, about the long hours she worked, and finally, about her child, the child she had lost years ago. Her voice shook as she spoke, but she didn't cry. She simply told the truth, her strength clear in every word. The father listened intently, his heart heavy with respect. He realized that the reason she had connected with his daughter so easily was because she understood loss. She knew what it meant to love and to lose, and that made her kindness deeper. It's more real. That evening, as he drove home, his daughter fell asleep in the back seat, clutching the little napkin drawing she had made for the waitress. The father glanced at her peaceful face in the rearview mirror, and then back at the road. For the first time, he wondered what it would mean to bring the waitress into their lives permanently, not as a server they visited. Could truly fill the empty space in their home. The thought scared him. He had spent years building walls around his life, keeping people at a distance, trusting no one fully. But now, because of his daughter's innocent wish and a stranger's compassion, those walls were crumbling. He didn't know if he was ready, but he knew his daughter was. She had already made her choice with her heart. The visits to the diner continued. Sometimes they stayed longer than they planned, talking and laughing. The waitress began to feel like part of their routine, like a thread woven into their days. Other customers noticed too. They saw the billionaire father sitting in a small diner booth, not in a private lounge, and they saw how his daughter clung to the waitress like she had found something precious. Whispers spread, but the father didn't care. For once in his life, what people thought didn't matter. One evening, after dinner, the little girl refused to leave right away. She hugged the waitress tightly and said, "I wish I could stay with you forever." The waitress's eyes filled with tears, and she kissed the girl's forehead softly. The father watched, his chest aching. He realized that this wasn't just a passing attachment anymore. His daughter's heart had chosen this woman, and the bond between them was growing too strong to ignore. That night, when the father tucked his daughter into bed, she whispered again, "Daddy, she makes me happy. Can she really be my mommy?" This time, the father didn't brush off her words. He sat on the edge of her bed, stroking her hair, and said softly, "We'll see, my princess. We'll see." After she fell asleep, he sat in the dark, thinking deeply. He knew that making such a decision would change everything. He wasn't just thinking about himself anymore. He was thinking about his daughter's happiness, about the waitress's broken heart, about the possibility of building something real together. The father began to notice how different his life felt now. The mansion no longer felt as empty. His work no longer felt like the only purpose he had. He found himself looking forward to the small, ordinary moments, driving to the diner, listening to his daughter's laughter, seeing the waitress smile at them. For a man who had lived surrounded by luxury, he was beginning to understand the beauty of simplicity. One Sunday, he decided to do something unusual, invited the waitress to join them outside of the diner. At first, she was hesitant, unsure if it was appropriate, but his daughter begged her with pleading eyes, and she agreed. They spent the afternoon at a small park, where the little girl ran freely, laughing and playing. The waitress and the father sat on a bench, watching her. They talked for hours. For the first time, the father opened up about his own pain, about losing his wife, about raising his daughter alone, and about the guilt he carried for not being enough for her. The waitress listened, her eyes soft with understanding. She didn't judge him, she simply listened, and sometimes that was all he needed. As the sun set and his daughter grew tired, falling asleep in the waitress's lap, the father looked at them and felt something he hadn't felt in years: peace. He knew then that this was more than coincidence. Life had brought them together for a reason. On the drive home, his mind was made up. He would not ignore this any longer. His daughter had found the motherly love she longed for, and he had found someone who could heal the broken places in his own heart too. But he also knew this was not something to rush. He had to be careful, respectful, and thoughtful. The waitress was not a prize to be won with money. She was a woman with her own past, her own pain, and her own choices to make. He resolved to take it step by step to show her that he wasn't just a billionaire trying to buy happiness, but a man willing to build something real. As he carried his daughter into the house that night, her small head resting on his shoulder, he whispered to himself, "Maybe this is what we were both waiting for." That night after the park visit, the father could not stop thinking about what had just happened. His daughter falling asleep in the waitress's arms had felt like the most natural thing in the world. It was not planned, not forced, not bought. It was real. He had seen peace on his daughter's face, a peace that even the grandest toys, the biggest parties, or the most expensive trips had never given her. That picture stayed with him as he lay awake, staring at the ceiling of his mansion. Mansion, though beautiful, felt emptier than ever before. Every echo in the long hallways reminded him of loneliness. He realized that while he had filled it with chandeliers, gold frames, and marble floors, he had not filled it with laughter or warmth. His daughter's small footsteps sounded lost in its vastness, but when she was with the waitress, she didn't seem lost at all. She seemed whole. The next morning, his daughter woke up asking about the waitress again. "Daddy, can we see her today?" "Please." Her innocent eyes carried a mixture of hope and need. He stroked her hair gently and said, "We'll go soon, my princess." He didn't want to make the visit seem like a routine, but he also knew that keeping his daughter away would only make her heart ache more. Over the next few weeks, their visits grew more frequent. Sometimes they went to the diner, sometimes they met at the park. The waitress slowly became part of their lives, not just someone who served them food. She laughed with the little girl, helped her braid her hair, and even taught her how to fold napkins into funny shapes. The girl adored her, and it showed in every smile and every laugh. One evening, after a long day at work, the father took his daughter to the diner again. It was quieter than usual, almost closing time. The waitress was cleaning tables, her apron slightly wrinkled, her hair pulled back. She saw them, her tired face brightened, and she came over. His daughter ran to her as always, hugging her tightly. The father sat back, watching. But this time he knew he could not keep silent anymore. After they finished eating, he asked the waitress if she could sit with them for a moment. She hesitated, glancing around to see if her manager might disapprove. But the diner was almost empty, so she agreed. She sat across from him while his daughter leaned sleepily against her arm. The father cleared his throat, his usually confident voice softer than ever. "I need to thank you," he began. "You've given my daughter something I couldn't. You've given her love, comfort, and joy that I failed to provide. She looks at you in a way she's never looked at anyone else." The waitress shifted, uncomfortably, her eyes dropping to the table. "She's a sweet child," she said gently. "Anyone would love her." He shook his head. "No, not anyone. She chose you. And you chose her too when you hugged her without hesitation. I can't ignore what I see. She needs you. And maybe I do too." The words hung in the air, heavy with meaning. The waitress looked at him, her eyes widening slightly, unsure how to respond. She wasn't used to such direct honesty, especially from a man like him. For a moment, silence stretched between them, broken only by the soft breathing of the little girl. Finally, the waitress spoke, her voice trembling. "I lost my child years ago. When your daughter hugged me for the first time, it felt like a piece of my heart came back to life. I never thought I could feel that again, but I'm scared. I don't want to hurt her, right? I don't want to give her something I can't promise." The father leaned forward, his eyes steady. "You already gave her something priceless, a mother's touch, even if only for a moment. I don't want this to be just moments. I want this to be real. I don't want to buy your time or force you into our lives. I want to ask if you would be willing to truly be a part of it." The waitress's hands shook as she reached for the girl's small fingers. The child stirred in her sleep, squeezing her hand instinctively. The waitress looked at her, then at him, and tears filled her eyes. "I don't know if I'm strong enough," she whispered. The father's voice softened. "Strength isn't about never being afraid. It's about showing up anyway. And you've already shown up for her in ways that no one else has." The waitress wiped her tears, and for the first time she allowed herself to smile through the pain. She nodded slightly, unable to speak more, but the father understood. Something had shifted between them. Something had begun. From that day on, their lives started to change. Slowly, carefully, the waitress became more present. She joined them for family outings, helped with school projects, and even came to their home sometimes. The mansion once, so quiet and cold, began to echo with laughter. The little girl danced around the rooms, showing the waitress her toys, pulling her into games, and holding her hand like she never wanted to let go. The father watched all of this with a full heart. For years, he had believed that his wealth was his greatest achievement. But now he realized his greatest achievement was right in front of him, his daughter's happiness. And that happiness was tied to the woman who had walked into their lives. So unexpectedly, one evening, after dinner at their home, the little girl fell asleep on the couch between them. The father looked at the waitress, his heart steady, but full of emotion. "You don't have to answer me now," he said softly, "but I need to ask you. Will you stay with us, not just as a friend, not just as someone we visit, but as part of our family?" The waitress looked at the sleeping child, then back at him. Her eyes glistened with tears, but this time they weren't only of sadness, they were of hope. She reached out and touched his hand gently, the smallest gesture, but it carried all the meaning he needed. Time passed, and the bond only grew stronger. The little girl no longer asked, "Can you be my mommy?" because in her heart she already knew the answer. The father, once a man lost in his wealth and guilt, had found peace in something simple and pure. When the waitress once broken by loss found healing in the love of a child who saw her not as a stranger, but as a mother. In the end, the billionaire father realized that the most valuable thing he could ever give his daughter wasn't money, wasn't power, wasn't security. It was love, family, and the courage to let someone new into their hearts. And so, the story that began with a small question in a diner ended with a home filled with laughter, warmth, and a bond that was stronger than loss, stronger than fear, and worth more than all the riches in the world.